Warren Buffett once said something that sounds simple but carries a much deeper warning. If you do not find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Most people treat that sentence like a motivational quote. They put it on posters. They share it on social media. But very few people stop and think about what it actually means. Have you ever paused for a moment and asked yourself if this quote might actually describe your own life? Because it's not just motivation, it's a description of how the modern money system works. Think about the way most people earn money. You wake up in the morning, you commute to work, you spend 8 or sometimes 10 hours completing tasks, and in exchange, you receive a paycheck. Does that routine sound familiar to you? For most of us, this feels completely normal. It's the path we were taught growing up. Go to school, get a good job, work hard, and eventually retire. But there's a hidden weakness in this model that most people never question. Your income is tied directly to your time. And time is the one resource that every human being has in limited supply. So here's a simple question. What happens when the hours stop? Imagine you owned a small store where you could only sell 24 items per day. Once those 24 items were gone, the store had to close. It wouldn't matter how many customers were still waiting outside. It wouldn't matter how high the demand was. You simply couldn't sell anything else that day. That's exactly how time-based income works. You only have so many hours available to sell each day. And once those hours are gone, your earning potential hits a ceiling. You can increase the value of your time. You can gain skills. You might become a lawyer, a doctor, or a highly paid specialist. But the structure is still the same. If you stop working, the money stops flowing. And that's why so many people feel like they're constantly running to keep up with rent, running to keep up with rising costs, running just to maintain their current lifestyle. Be honest for a moment. Have you ever felt like life sometimes turns into an endless financial treadmill? The issue isn't that people aren't working hard enough. The issue is that this model of earning money is linear. 1 hour of work produces 1 unit of income. 10 hours of work produces 10 units. But there's a physical limit to how many hours you can work. This is where the mindset of wealthy investors and business owners starts to look very different. Instead of relying only on their time, they focus on building things that can continue producing value without their constant presence. It could be a business, an investment, a piece of software, content that reaches millions of people online, something that can keep working even when they're not. That's the real meaning behind Warren Buffett's quote. It's not about avoiding work. It's about creating systems where money isn't permanently tied to the number of hours you personally put in. Because if your entire income depends on the hours you work today, then one day when you can't work those hours anymore, that income disappears. And that realization leads us to a difficult question. What if the way most people earn money today is quietly trapping them in a system where they must keep selling their time just to stay afloat? That system has a name. It's called the employee trap. Stay with me, because the next part explains why most people never escape this cycle. When people say the financial system is rigged, they often imagine corruption, secret meetings, or powerful people pulling hidden strings. But the truth is usually less dramatic and much more powerful. The system isn't rigged by conspiracy. It's rigged by math. And once you see the math behind it, you start noticing it everywhere in everyday life. Lesson 1, the tax gap. Let's start with something most Americans deal with every year, taxes. Imagine 2 neighbors living on the same street. The first neighbor works a regular job and earns $80,000 a year. Every paycheck already has money taken out for federal tax, state tax, Social Security, and Medicare. By the time that money reaches their bank account, a large portion is already gone. Now look at the second neighbor. Instead of earning most of their money from a salary, they make income from investments, stocks, dividends, or selling assets they've owned for years. When they make money, the tax rules are often different. In many cases, long-term capital gains taxes are lower than ordinary income taxes. In other words, the person working 40 hours a week may end up paying a higher tax rate than the person making money from investments. You can see this difference in everyday life. A software engineer earning a paycheck pays taxes immediately, but someone who bought shares of a successful company years ago might see their investment grow for years before paying taxes, and often at a lower rate. The system is quietly sending a message. Income from labor is taxed one way. Income from ownership is taxed another way. But the next piece of this puzzle is even more important. Lesson 2, the inflation delay. Now let's talk about something everyone feels but rarely thinks about deeply. Inflation. You've probably noticed it in simple places. Groceries cost more than they used to. Gas prices rise faster than expected. Rent seems to increase every year. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a grocery store and thought, wait, didn't this cost way less last year? But here's the hidden pattern. Prices often rise before wages do. For example, imagine your favorite fast food meal used to cost $8. Over a few years, that same meal becomes $11. Your rent might jump from $1,200 to $1,500. But your salary at work might only increase by 2 or 3% a year if it increases at all. This delay creates a quiet problem. Your paycheck may look bigger on paper, but your purchasing power is shrinking. Now compare that to someone who owns assets. If they own a house, rising housing prices increase their net worth. If they own stocks, those assets often rise during inflation as companies adjust their prices. So while many workers feel like they're falling behind, asset owners may actually be moving ahead. Same economy, different side of the equation. Lesson 3, linear versus exponential income. The final piece of the puzzle is the difference between linear income and exponential income. Most jobs operate on a linear model. You trade time for money. 1 hour of work equals 1 unit of pay. Work twice as many hours, earn roughly twice as much money. But this system always hits a ceiling. There are only 24 hours in a day, and realistically, maybe 8 to 10 of those hours can be spent working. Now compare that to something scalable. Imagine a graphic designer who charges $100 for a logo. They must design each logo individually. If they stop working, the income stops. Now imagine that same designer creates an online design template and sells it for $20. If 10 people buy it, they make $200. If 10,000 people buy it, they make $200,000. The effort to create the product happened once, but the income can scale far beyond the hours spent creating it. You see this everywhere today. A YouTube video can be watched by millions of people. A mobile app can be downloaded around the world. A software product can serve thousands of customers simultaneously. These systems separate time from income, and that's the key mathematical difference between many workers and many owners. Workers are paid based on the hours they contribute. Owners are paid based on the systems and assets they control. Once you understand these three forces, tax differences, inflation delays, and the limits of linear income, you begin to see why so many people feel like they're running faster every year just to stay in the same place. It's not always because they're doing something wrong. Often, it's because they're playing a game where the math itself favors a different strategy. And once you understand the math, the next question becomes unavoidable. If the system works this way, why do most people still choose the path that keeps them trading time for money? The answer has very little to do with math. It has everything to do with human psychology. Robert Kiyosaki once said something that perfectly captures the mindset behind this topic. The rich don't work for money. They make money work for them. At first, that sentence sounds like a motivational slogan, but when you look deeper, it reveals something uncomfortable about how most people actually earn their living. Because for millions of people, money does not work for them. They work for money, and they work very hard. By now, the math is clear. If your income depends entirely on the hours you work, your financial life will always have a ceiling. The system rewards ownership, leverage, and assets far more than it rewards simply trading time. So a natural question appears. If the math is so obvious, why do most people still do it? Why do millions of smart, educated, hardworking people continue to build their entire lives around a paycheck? The answer isn't intelligence, it's psychology. Because a paycheck doesn't just pay your bills, it quietly rewires your brain. But the real reason behind this is something most people never realize. Lesson 4. The comfort loop. Human beings are wired to seek safety. Our brains evolved in environments where uncertainty could mean danger. So when something in life becomes predictable, when it arrives on the same day every 2 weeks, it creates a powerful sense of relief. A paycheck does exactly that. You know roughly how much money will appear in your bank account. You know when it will arrive. You can plan your bills around it. That predictability feels good. It feels stable. But over time, something subtle happens. You start organizing your entire life around that predictable flow. You choose a car payment that requires that paycheck. You choose an apartment or mortgage that depends on that paycheck. Your insurance, your subscriptions, your lifestyle, all of it becomes tied to that steady deposit. And before you realize it, the paycheck stops feeling like income. It starts feeling like oxygen. The idea of losing it doesn't just feel inconvenient. It feels terrifying, not because you love your job, but because your entire financial structure is now dependent on that steady drip. Lesson 5. The busy illusion. There's another psychological trap hiding inside modern work culture. Ask almost anyone how they're doing, and you'll hear the same answer. I'm busy. I'm slammed. I've got so much going on. And strangely, people say this with pride. Being busy has become a badge of honor. It signals that you're important, that people need you, that your time is valuable. But there's a hidden problem with that mindset. Busy does not always mean productive. Sometimes being constantly busy is just a way of avoiding a much harder question. Is the path I'm on actually leading where I want to go? When your days are packed with meetings, deadlines, emails, and responsibilities, you rarely get the quiet space needed to step back and think about your long-term direction. You stay on the treadmill, running faster and faster, but never checking if the treadmill is actually moving you anywhere. Lesson 6. The social validation trap. The final psychological hook is social approval. Work doesn't just provide money. It provides identity, titles, promotions, status. Think about how often people introduce themselves by their job. I'm a lawyer. I'm a project manager. I'm in finance. Those labels become part of how we measure our worth. Companies understand this extremely well. A promotion often comes with a slightly higher salary, but it also comes with something even more powerful. A new title, senior manager, director, vice president. These titles cost the company almost nothing to create, but they can be incredibly valuable to your ego. They make you feel recognized, successful, respected, and sometimes that feeling becomes so powerful that people stay in roles they secretly dislike, simply because they don't want to lose the title attached to them. The applause of the outside world becomes more important than the quiet question inside. Am I building the life I actually want? The wake-up moment. None of this makes people weak. It makes them human. The paycheck system is powerful precisely because it taps into 3 deep human needs: security, belonging, recognition. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If those needs are met entirely by your job, then your freedom becomes tied to your employer, your sense of safety, your sense of progress, even your identity, all connected to a system you don't control. And that realization can be unsettling, but it can also be liberating, because once you see the psychological loop clearly, you gain the ability to step outside of it. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow. You don't have to burn bridges or make reckless decisions, but you can start asking a different question. Instead of asking, how do I get a better paycheck? You begin asking, how do I build something that keeps working even when I'm not? Because the moment that shift happens, You stop seeing your job as your only source of income. You start seeing it as fuel for building something bigger. And that mindset shift is the first step toward leaving the cage. In the next part, we'll talk about a different way of thinking about money. Not the mindset of a worker, but the mindset of an owner. Naval Ravikant once said something that cuts straight to the heart of wealth creation. Seek wealth, not money or status. Wealth is assets that you earn while you sleep. Most people spend their entire lives trying to earn more money, but owners focus on something very different. They try to build things that keep earning money even when they're not working. That single shift in thinking changes everything, because employees ask one question: how much do I get paid per hour? Owners ask a completely different question: what can I build once that pays me many times? And once you start seeing the world through that lens, you begin to notice something fascinating. Many of the richest people in the world are not working harder than everyone else. They simply own things that scale. Example 1, the coffee shop owner. Imagine two people working in the same coffee shop. The barista wakes up early, stands behind the counter, makes drinks for 8 hours, and gets paid hourly. When their shift ends, the money stops. The owner of that same coffee shop also worked hard in the beginning, finding the location, buying equipment, hiring staff. But once the system is running, something interesting happens. Every coffee sold in that shop creates income for the owner. Even when the owner is at home, even when the owner is on vacation, even when the owner is asleep, the barista sells time. The owner owns the system that sells coffee. Which position would you rather be, in the person selling the coffee or the person who owns the coffee shop? And be honest. Do you think most people stay in the barista role because they want to, or because they never realized the owner role was even possible? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Example 2, the YouTube creator. Now look at something even more modern. A person uploads a helpful video on YouTube explaining how to fix a common problem, maybe repairing a leaky sink or learning basic investing. That video might take 3 hours to make. But if the video becomes useful to people, it might be watched for years. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of views. Each view might generate a little bit of ad revenue. The creator did the work once, but the asset keeps working for years. That is ownership in the digital age. Have you ever watched a YouTube video that was uploaded years ago but still helped you solve a problem today? Think about that for a moment. Someone you've never met may have created that video years earlier, and it's still providing value to you right now. Example 3, the app developer. Think about someone who builds a simple mobile app. Maybe it's a budgeting tool. Maybe it's a productivity timer. At the beginning, the developer spends months building it. But once the app is published, people around the world can download it every day. 10 downloads, 100 downloads, 10,000 downloads. The creator is not personally handing the app to each person. The asset is doing the work. This is what owners look for: leverage, ways for their effort to multiply. Example 4, the landlord. Real estate is one of the oldest examples of ownership. A landlord buys a property and rents it out. Each month, tenants pay rent. Of course, there are responsibilities, maintenance, taxes, repairs, but the key idea remains simple. The landlord owns an asset that produces cash flow. The income is not tied to hours worked. It is tied to ownership, the pattern behind all wealth. If you zoom out, a pattern becomes clear. The world's most financially successful people tend to own one or more of these things: businesses, real estate, stocks, digital products, intellectual property. These are all forms of assets. Assets have one powerful characteristic: they continue producing value even when you're not actively working. This is why the gap between workers and owners grows over time. Workers earn linear income. Owners build exponential systems. The real mindset shift. Becoming an owner doesn't always mean quitting your job tomorrow and starting a company. In fact, Many owners begin exactly where you might be right now, working a normal job, but thinking differently about what they do after work. Instead of only consuming entertainment every night, they ask small but powerful questions. Can I build something useful? Can I invest in something that grows? Can I create an asset that continues working tomorrow? At first, those assets may be tiny: a small investment account, a simple digital product, a side project. But over time, something remarkable happens. Instead of relying on one paycheck, your life slowly begins to include multiple streams of value. And that's when the financial game starts to change. Because the moment you begin thinking like an owner, you stop asking, how many hours do I need to work? You start asking something far more powerful. What can I build today that will still be working for me 5 years from now? And that question is the beginning of financial leverage. In the next section, we'll explore a surprising concept that explains why escaping the paycheck cycle is so difficult for most people. A concept known as the Great Filter. Keep watching, because the next idea might be the most important one in this entire video. Tony Robbins once said, "It's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives. It's what we do consistently." And that idea is exactly where most people misunderstand the escape plan. Escaping the paycheck trap is not one big dramatic moment. It's not quitting your job tomorrow. It's not gambling everything on one risky business idea. The real escape happens through small, consistent, strategic moves that slowly shift your life from dependency to ownership. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. If you wait until you feel ready, you will likely stay where you are forever. Because the system is comfortable, the paycheck arrives, bills get paid, life continues, and comfort is one of the most powerful cages ever created. So the first step is brutally simple. Step 1. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect time to start building something of your own. Not when you're 25, not when you're 35, not when you're 45. There will always be responsibilities, bills, and reasons to delay. The people who eventually gain financial freedom usually start the same way. They begin before they feel ready. They start small. An investment account, a small online project, a skill that can generate income outside their job. Nothing dramatic, but they start. Because the longer you delay ownership, the more years compound growth quietly disappears. Step 2. Turn your job into fuel. Your job doesn't have to be the enemy. In fact, in the early stages, your job can be your greatest financial weapon. It provides predictable income, but instead of letting that income disappear into pure consumption, owners redirect part of it toward assets. That might mean investing consistently into index funds, buying your first rental property, building a digital product, creating a YouTube channel that teaches something you know, starting a small online service. Every dollar you move from consumption to assets becomes a tiny soldier working for your future freedom. Step 3. Protect your time like an owner. One of the biggest differences between employees and owners is how they treat time. Employees protect their job hours. Owners protect their building hours. That might mean dedicating 1 or 2 hours each evening to something that compounds. Learning a valuable skill, creating content, building a product, studying investments. It doesn't sound glamorous, but remember something important. The first stage of ownership often looks boring and invisible. No applause, no recognition, just consistent building. And then one day the results start appearing. Step 4. Build assets, not just income. This is where the real shift happens. Most people chase higher salaries. Owners chase assets that produce income. Instead of asking, how can I earn more money this year? They ask, what can I own that keeps generating value for years? That could be stocks in growing companies, a rental property, a digital course, a software tool, a YouTube channel, a small online business. The exact asset matters less than the principle behind it. Ownership creates leverage. the reality check. Now let's be honest about something. This path is not easy. There will be nights when you are tired, weekends when progress feels slow, moments when you question whether it's worth it, but compare that temporary discomfort to the alternative. 30 or 40 years of depending on a paycheck that stops the moment you stop working. One path requires short-term effort. The other requires lifetime dependence. The moment of decision. Every person watching this video will eventually face a quiet decision. Not today, not in a dramatic moment, but gradually, over time, you will either continue building a life where your income depends entirely on your time, or you will slowly build systems that allow your money, assets, and creations to work for you. No one makes that choice for you. Your boss won't. The government won't. The financial system certainly won't. Only you can decide whether you remain inside the system or start building a way out, because escaping the trap doesn't begin with a business. It begins with a decision that from this moment forward, part of your life will be dedicated not just to earning money, but owning the engines that produce it. Steve Jobs once said something that becomes more powerful the older you get. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. At first, that sentence sounds philosophical, but when you look at the way most people spend their lives, it becomes something much more serious. Because the real currency of life isn't money, it's time. And every single day, whether we realize it or not, we are trading pieces of that time for survival. Waking up early, rushing through traffic, working long hours, waiting for the next paycheck. There is nothing shameful about working hard. In fact, hard work is one of the most honorable things a person can do. The real tragedy is not effort. The real tragedy is effort that never leads to freedom. Millions of people spend decades running as fast as they can on a treadmill that was never designed to stop. Not because they are lazy, not because they lack intelligence, but because no one ever showed them that another path exists. A path where your effort slowly transforms into assets, where the things you build begin to carry some of the weight for you, where your future is not entirely dependent on how many hours you can physically work. And the truth is, you don't have to change everything overnight. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow. You don't have to gamble your life on some risky idea. Real change often begins much more quietly. It begins the moment you start thinking differently, the moment you start asking new questions. Instead of asking, how can I earn a little more this year? You begin asking, what can I build today that will still be working for me 10 years from now? That single question has quietly shaped the lives of countless entrepreneurs, investors, and creators. And it can shape yours too. Because escaping the paycheck trap isn't about rejecting work. It's about transforming work into something more powerful. Instead of spending your entire life feeding the machine, you begin slowly building machines of your own. Machines made of ideas, assets, systems, investments, creations. And the earlier you start, the more powerful that process becomes. Not because of luck, but because of one force that quietly shapes almost everything in finance and in life. Time. Time turns small investments into large ones. Time turns small ideas into powerful systems. Time turns consistent effort into extraordinary results. But time only rewards those who begin. If you want to understand how money actually works in the modern world, make sure to subscribe to this channel, because every week we break down the financial systems most people were never taught. So maybe the real question isn't whether the system is fair. Maybe the real question is much simpler. What will you start building today?